Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, Sarah Bishop joins me all the way from New Zealand.
Talk to me in 6 months' time, it might be quite different, But so this is my story at this point in time. A few things that I'm utilising to help me get through it, and so maybe it'll help someone else.
Sarah is the epitome of active. She runs mountains and serves as a police detective and sharpshooter. But sarcoidosis is trying to stop her.
So I would get nearer the top of a hill, and I'd just get completely breathless and couldn't push through, which was very strange for me.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello, this is episode 136 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. The date of this recording, April 7th, 2025. And remember, April is Sarcoidosis Awareness Month. And that was the subject, by the way, of my previous recording. So go back and listen to episode 135 if you want to get caught up and hear about all the wonderful things that the FSR team has planned for sarcoidosis all around the United States. And so that's right there in episode 135. And just so you're not confused, I'll tell you that I also released a bonus episode last week where I talked about how FSR has worked so hard to make it so that FMLA now covers you from work if you want to participate in a clinical trial without fear of losing your job or some other kinds of retribution because you're taking too much time off. So check out that episode as well. But so if you want to be in a clinical trial but you're afraid your boss won't like it, well, it is now covered by FMLA. So that's in the bonus episode from last week. So, of course, as you hear me say, I do this podcast to help you see hope, maybe light at the end of the sarcoidosis tunnel. I want us all to have this sense of community so that we can let one another know that there are others out there. Because how many people have said on the podcast and elsewhere, I didn't know anybody else who had sarcoidosis. So thank you for the podcast because I can listen and now I know. I know what the effects are for other people, and I know what some of the answers are that are out there, and in many cases, of course, we're finding those answers. So, therefore, ipso facto, if you will, the hope, right? Well, now I want to do a little bit of a deep dive here because you hear podcasters say this occasionally, and maybe some of their early episodes. I certainly said it. In my case, it's certainly true. You go through all this setup. You have an idea for a podcast, or you see, in my case, you see a need, at least a perceived need for a podcast. And so you go through all this process, and it was a lot harder. It wasn't as easy as just creating, say, a Facebook page or an Instagram account. I mean, there's a lot of rigmarole to go through on the back end to set up a podcast. But so you go through the whole process and you put it out there, your first episode, and you wait, right? You're like, is the universe going to find this? If they find it, are they going to listen? Have I come up with such a sub-sector of an idea? Like if you just say, I want to talk about baseball, well, there's a gazillion things in baseball, and there's a lot of people would be in front of you to talk more authoritatively about baseball than just your opinion of whatever. So then they say, well, what you want to do is you want to niche down, right? You want to get into some aspect, say, of baseball that nobody else is talking about, and then you hope you haven't niched down so far that it's you and one other person in Oregon or whatever who's interested in that particular aspect of the game. Well, so now I look at sarcoidosis, and it's this rare disease, and I'm thinking, well, I have it, and according to statistics, about 200,000 other people have it in the United States, and and then you look all around the world, and the number is whatever it is there. Let's call it a million, although I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. But if there's 200,000 in the United States, you can do the math, right? And so you think, okay, well, I'm going to talk about sarcoidosis, but nobody's going to know I'm talking about sarcoidosis, and maybe some people will find it and they'll listen and they'll like it and they'll share it, and maybe I can get this group, the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, to know that I'm out here in the wilderness talking about it. And I just knew from my experience it was hard to get good information about this disease. It was rare. It was hard to find straight talk about just how bad it is, how bad it's going to get, how treatable it might be. But I also knew from my lifetime as a reporter that there were a lot of people out there that had stories to share, if I could get them to share, if I could find them, and that these stories would be impactful and downright interesting. And in fact, from my editor's perspective, because part of my job at the TV station historically has been to listen to younger reporters pitch their ideas, and then you either say, yeah, go cover that, or no, that's weak, find something else, right? But from my perspective, from my editor's perspective, I kind of saw some of the things around me in the sarcoidosis world as low-hanging fruit that nobody was picking. Because the stories that I knew were out there, just from the little bit of research I'd been able to do, I knew they were fantastic. And I'd started volunteering with FSR a little bit back then as I guess I was an advocate. And then there was FSR, this organization that was doing so much good work, and I just thought, man, if I could kind of get in with them a little bit, they could be a source of content. They might guide me to some key people, maybe some patients, maybe some researchers, some doctors. And so all of this was back in late 2019. The fourth quarter of 2019 is when I decided I wanted to do this. And in January of 2020, I decided to launch. Now remember, in January, that's 2 or 3 months pre-pandemic, right? The pandemic really hit in March of 2020. That's when all of a sudden all kinds of crazy things started happening and the world began to shut down. But at that time, podcasts were still a pretty novel concept. In fact, at that time, I had never even heard of a Zoom call, right? I'd never even heard of Zoom, but I figured out that was the best way to record an interview, and it wasn't like everybody had Zoom on their computers or their phones or anything at that time. This was like the wilderness, right? But I worked through some of the technology challenges. I set up this little studio in my home office, and I gave it a shot. I hoped it would be worth it, and I am getting to a point here. But I hope that someone would listen and that I would have the time to do it and the content to keep it going. And I just have to tell you that that you did listen. FSR listened and asked me to make it the official podcast of the organization. That's why now we call it the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. And I'm going to share a couple of updates with you. By later this year, 2025, we will see 100,000 downloads. In fact, as I'm speaking right now, the podcast is only about 4,000 short. So we're at 95,000 plus downloads. And for a guy who was sitting around thinking, that's an idea, and I think I can help, but will anybody find it? So to get from maybe nobody will ever listen to 100,000 downloads, I can't tell you. I cannot tell you how good that feels. And then I have to share with you how pleased I am. On March 31st, just a couple of weeks ago of this year, FSR asked me to join their board of directors. Man, I never could have dreamed that this idea for this podcast would take this trajectory. I mean, it does. It takes a fair amount of time to research, to schedule, to write, record, produce every single episode. I do all of that by myself. But I have to tell you that selfishly, it really feeds my soul. My wife shakes her head And she's like, "Why are you working so hard on this?" I'm like, "Mary, I just have to tell you that that I do it because I like it. I just feel like it's an important thing to do. And so when I'm doing it, when I'm talking to people, it just really, really feels good. And the stories that we've shared, the outpouring of support from the pharma community, the progress the show has documented in terms of patient care, improvements in medicine, patient outreach. Then last year, I got to host a discussion with Mary McGowan and the team in front of the FDA in Washington, D.C. And all of this, folks, it's truly humbling. It really, really is. So I just want to say that I look forward to my new role as a board member, and I want to help any way I can to guide the organization and to help all of us get over the proverbial sarcoidosis hump, as it were. And so I just wanted to share that we're approaching that 100,000 episode mark, and that I am a proud new member of the FSR Board of Directors. All right. But for now, we're just going to keep continuing doing what we do here on the podcast. And coming up, I did share with you a couple of months ago that I'd received an email from New Zealand and a woman sharing her troubles with sarcoidosis. And we finally overcame the time differences. We figured out all the Zoom information because it's literally halfway around the world. And Sarah Bishop will be sharing the story of how sarcoidosis has impacted her life. And that's coming up next here on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. Joining me now is Sarah Bishop, all the way from New Zealand, where it's a different day there than it is here, which blows my mind. But Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Hey, really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So you reached out to me initially via email and said you'd found the podcast and that you thought it had helped. What was it that made you want to reach out initially?
Well, I had my own experience with connecting with someone through my own journey prior to this, and it just made such a big difference to hear his story. And although he's not dealing with sarcoidosis, he's dealing with another rare inflammatory disease, and has been doing so for 12 years. And he's quite a young active man, and just connecting with him. Oh, it was a game changer for me with regards to how I'd been coping with the whole thing and medications and the things that I was doing to kind of get control of it and in my own way. And he just, the connection with someone just made such a big difference. I thought if my story might be of interest to someone, then I would be really keen to share it. And even if just one thing I see resonates with one person, it'll be worth it. I'd just really like to help. And maybe sharing is a way to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to find that sense of community when you talk about people who have sarcoidosis, because there's so few of us and we're so scattered around the globe that, very seldom are there multiple people with sarcoidosis in the same room. So if you want to hear what somebody else is going through, there's not a lot of other places you can do that, with the exception of a conference, or here on the podcast. So,
Yes.
And you had listened to some of the other episodes?
Yes, I have. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
you listened to some other patients and you thought, wow, maybe I could share my story and that would help.
yeah, and I guess although I'm only early on in my own journey, I have some things that are really key to helping me cope
Uh-huh.
and manage everything, and I'd like to share those because people might find some things useful as well, maybe be inspired to give some stuff a go. And yet, if it is only my story, and every sarcoidosis story is so individual. So anything I say is nothing like, well, I can do it, so can you, or anything. Please don't anyone think that I'm trying to sit up here and preach about how you should deal with it or not. This is just my story, and talk to me in 6 months' time. It might be quite different. But so this is my story at this point in time. A few things that I'm utilizing to help me get through it, and yeah, so maybe it'll help someone else.
All right. So you're a first responder, right? Or
Yes.
yeah. So tell us about
Yeah.
that, first of all.
Yep. So I'm in the New Zealand Police. I'm a detective, and frontline, which means I am frontline and responder. Yes. And I've been in the police for 28 years now,
28.
which has just gone by like so crazy how quickly that has passed. But I'm an old hat at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any crime actually in New Zealand? Because all I ever hear about is kayaking and fishing and good times in New Zealand.
Yes, that's all we have here. So
That's
yeah,
right.
I get quite bored. There's really nothing to do. No. Unfortunately, we also have our fair share of crime, gang problems. I've kind of spent most of my career in the adult sexual assault zone and child protection, and that's kind of where I'm most passionate about. That really dealing with people who have been through a hell of a time and still getting on with life the best they can. I find that really inspirational to work with. And so I've been a specialist interviewer with what we call an enhanced cognitive interview with regards to victims and witnesses of serious crime and sexual crime. And I've been doing that for 15 years now. So it kind of found my little niche, and really,
Yeah.
really driven by that.
So if there's a sexual offense of some kind and you're investigating it, your job is to go in and either talk to the victim and or the witnesses.
Yes. So if I'm holding an investigation myself, I'll manage all of that right through to prosecution. But I do tend to interview a lot more people than I'm actually going to deal with through the investigation, because I interview for other investigations. Yeah, so sexual crime and witnesses to serious crime like homicides and um, serious assaults and things like that. Yes.
Wow. So you do also investigate homicides. That's part of your bailiwick, your purview.
Yes, yeah. I'd be part of a team with regards to that. Everything's done as a team, which is just such a cool thing about the job. Everyone brings to the team something individual. Then as we work together, we achieve our best result usually.
Yeah.
So yes, yep. So any day of the week I could come in and there might have been a homicide that we get to investigate or kidnapping. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how many murders have you investigated?
Oh my
Homicide.
goodness. Well, I've been on a team for jeepers. Sometimes I'm just involved in the first couple of days and then go back to my core role, but I would just be absolutely plucking an amount out of the
Okay.
out of
Well,
thin air.
so
I could say
so
maybe 30, 40, 50.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in the city that I live in Roanoke, it's easy to remember because we typically have about 12 homicides a year on average, which is one a month, and that's just easy for me because we cover I work at a news station, so we cover that stuff all the
Yes.
time. And so I just know that there's about 12 years. So if you had 12 a year times 28 years, you pull a number out. But I have no idea how populated an area you live in or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that would be an extreme amount if we were dealing with one a
Would be.
month. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. We're not a huge town or city, but a little one.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess on average at the moment, one every 3 months.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how long does it take you to figure out somebody's lying? Right
Sometimes.
away?
No, I've given up on the trying to figure that out straight away. I've had cases where I've come out of the interview halfway through to check in with the monitor, because these interviews that I do are recorded on DVD.
Uh-huh.
And so during the interview, you might take a few breaks and I'll check in with the monitor who's watching from another room and listening. I've had one where in the monitor's break, I've just said, "Oh my goodness, I've never heard so much rotten all my life," and it was the strangest case I've dealt with even to this day. But no, everything was as this person said it was. She was an absolutely fantastic witness and victim, and very 100% reliable. And all the evidence, which is what we actually rely on, all the evidence married up to what she had told us at the start. So nothing stranger than the truth, eh? That's where we.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You called it so much rot. Is that I loved your little New Zealand expressions. You guys, such a cool way of saying things. So much rot in all your life. Well, so when did you start feeling like something wasn't right with you in terms of your health?
Yeah, well, I wonder, is it at all helpful to go back a little bit to kind of just share a little bit about the fact that I'd been pretty physical all my life?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, because you've really got a great resume when it comes to that stuff. Let's talk about some of that.
As a kid, just active outdoors, brought up on a farm and did the horses and that sort of thing. And when I say did the horses, I rode horses. I competed most weekends and did gymnastics. But I don't think I was really physically fit back then. I was just a kid doing cool stuff. And then kind of got a little bit chubby and not so active as a late teenager, early 20s, and then just got inspired to get a bit fitter and did some running and some mountain running kind of thing. I just love hills, and I'm not a big fan of the running on flat, boring surfaces where I think it's quite hard on the body. So I'd much rather boulder hop and run up the side of mountains. So I did that, and then joined the police. And in the police, I've been really lucky that I've been able to be part of a specialist tactical squad. So we call it here the Armed Defender Squad. It's not full time, but it is a squad that responds to armed incidents and things like that. So the expectation is to be pretty fit, because on any given day you could be called out. You've got to carry a whole bunch of gear, which weighs quite a lot, and you could be expected to be out there carrying all this and working for days at a time. And your teammates need to know that when you are exhausted, you're still going to be able to function mentally and physically. So the tests are quite for fitness are quite extreme, but not over extreme. I say that, but there are people out there doing a whole lot more than what I had to do to get in. But as a woman, I was only one of, I think at the time when I was in the Armed Defender Squad, one of 3 women in the country who. So that was kind of indicative just of the level of fitness and stress that you're put under physically and mentally with regards to people wanting to
don't play that down too much. There's less than 1% of the population that could do what you guys do. So I mean, because of my background of TV news. I've been around it enough to know that the people that roll out for these tactical teams are some serious folks, and making that
Yeah, I
cut
kind
is
of
very impressive.
Yeah, I kind of I've decided that being ignorant and oblivious is one of my superpowers, because if I had really had any idea when I started going into it that it was actually going to be as tough as what it was, I probably wouldn't have committed to it like I did,
Right.
Um, but yeah, I did, and just so lucky to have had all those opportunities.
Yeah.
Some of the courses they were just you were just given a beasting. They just thrashed you for days and days, and you had no sleep and hardly any time to eat. And I can remember one meal on one course. I'd lost the saliva, the ability to chew and produce saliva, and I just was kind of getting bits of sweet potato and virtually just throwing them back and swallowing them whole. You know, but somehow managed to pull through. I just imagined that I was a puppet on strings,
Yeah.
like one of the marionette or something. And I'd just keep dancing as long as they kept, pulling on the strings. I'd keep dancing, and I just also remember thinking, if they put me down to rest, don't think that it's going to be for any particular length of time. Because then you just psych yourself into not being able to do it when they pick the strings up again. So, yeah,
That's
if that makes
crazy.
sense. Does that make any sense?
So I
Yeah.
believe you wrote in your email to me that you're some sort of a expert marksman too.
No, I did not say that. I know I was a marksman, just not an expert, but yeah, I was a reasonable shot. So I was a marksman on the squad, yes.
Okay, so what do you consider a reasonable shot?
Ooh. Um, ooh.
I mean, you could hit a
Yeah, I
poker
could.
chip at 100 yards. What? What?
Yes. Yeah, I probably could. Yeah.
That's a pretty
Um,
good shot.
yeah, I was one of the better shots, or better with the firearms. Yeah. So, but plus two, it made sense for me to be a marksman because I was little. I don't know if it's you can tell by looking at me here, and people who are listening won't tell at all, but I'm about 164 centimeters, so 5'4", I think, five
Okay.
foot four tall, and when I was on the squad, I was about 62 kilograms. So I was one of the smaller members. So it would have made no sense for me to be leading the charge if you were kicking indoors. I'd
Right.
bounce right back off.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so marksmen were generally out further.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
that made sense as well.
that's all impressive. And then you sort of brushed through this, but you were a distance runner and you prefer to run trails as opposed to running on cement or on the street and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And typically, if there's a trail, there's a mountain, and if there's a mountain, then there's uphill running, and you particularly like that.
Yeah, I really do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what it is about it really. And to be honest, I haven't done as much as I would like to be able to say I have done. But yes, I do love the hills, and I'm really lucky that I live still in the area that I was brought up, and there's farmland there with some nice little hills that I can go up and down. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
love that.
So
Mm.
what is your longest distance run?
Oh, only half marathon mountain running. Yeah,
Half marathon.
yeah, yes,
Okay. So
yeah.
13.1 miles.
Right, yeah, yeah,
That's
21K here.
that's a pretty good run in the woods.
They're quite slow. It gives me running on hills gives me an excuse to be slow. Because yeah, I've done one run that we have here called the Goat, and it's on Mount Ruapehu, and oh, it's just the most beautiful spot to be, and um, yeah, so that's a half marathon that took me about 3.5 hours, and I was kind of in the top third of my age group. So, normally a half marathon would have taken me maybe an hour 45.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just extreme boulder hopping and up waterfalls and over rivers and boardwalks. And one year there was some snow in the last half.
Wow. So it's not running per se. You're just sort of covering ground is what you're doing.
That's a really good way of saying it. Yes. Yeah.
So
crawling, crawling, rolling, whatever it takes.
right. As long as you get there. So, and you mentioned the equestrian part. Do you still compete in equestrian?
Yes, I do. I'm just
Really?
getting back into it. Yeah,
All right.
show jumping mostly.
So show jumping. So you're on a English saddle horse, not a Western saddle horse, right? With a
Yes,
horn
yeah.
on it. Okay, for people who don't know the difference. And so you're out there going around the ring and doing like the big jumps.
Yeah, well, not so big. About 1.20 is where I'm not at the moment. Just getting back into it, but my horse can do that and a bit more. So yeah, hoping this coming season, which will be kind of September through to March, hoping to give that a really good nudge.
Oh,
Again. Yeah.
That's so incredible that you're doing all this stuff. And I mean, I was going to say, what do you do in your spare time? I mean, it sounds like you work and you play.
Yeah, I just love doing cool stuff. And family. Yeah.
And family. Yeah. Okay. So are you married?
I have a partner. Yeah, Mike is
Okay.
my partner. And we've been in a relationship. Short term so far, but
Okay. All right.
going well. Yeah, he's a fabulous guy. Very lucky, especially through this journey. He's just been absolutely infallible. Really, really lucky.
All right. So did it come a time when you're out there running on the hills or riding the horse or working with the tactical team when all of a sudden you couldn't do something? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, so the tactical team, I gave that up, a while ago now. So I'm not on the tactical team now.
Okay.
But it kind of, I was going back over some notes and things, and it maybe 8 months before I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, I just did start feeling a few things. I was starting to have some night sweats. And sleep was not so flash because of the night sweats. I still felt pretty good in every other way. And I went to the doctor. And of course, because of my age, I'm 55 now, my doctor considered menopause and put me on, at a later stage, hormone replacement therapy for the night sweats. But that was the only symptom I had of menopause. There was nothing else. So I now know that was probably something more to do with the sarcoidosis, but you only go with what you know at the time, don't you? And so the hormonal replacement therapy did nothing for the night sweats. When I went to see the doctor, she said, well, while you're here, have we checked your blood pressure lately? And I said, no. So we did that and it was up, which was very unusual for me. My blood pressure had always been really good to low. So we just monitored that for a while, and then and tiredness. And I talked to the doctor about that too. Talked to a lot of friends. We all took iron replacements and things like that, and supplements. And I kept saying to my friends, and that when is this meant to kick in and make me feel better? And so there were just those, I thought, quite small things that started off, and none of them I thought were really connected, weirdly. And about that time, my resting heart rate was about 43.
I'm sorry,
so
53?
43.
43?
Yeah.
Ooh, you are fit.
Yes. No. Well, that's what everybody kept saying. Well, it's because you're so fit, Sarah. And I'm like, well, I'm not that fit.
Okay, so all right. So that's where you were starting to see the sarcoidosis. I got you. Okay.
I guess so, yeah. And yet my heart rate had always been quite low. My granddad couldn't go to war because he had such a low blood pressure, and heart rate and things like that. I don't know the ins and the outs of it, but it wasn't a surprise. So I guess my doctor, we did end up medicating for the low with the blood pressure going up, and the doctor put it down to being hereditary. My mum had always had to deal with high blood pressure, so it was a hereditary thing, and that just didn't ride with me right from the start, because I don't think you should just give in to hereditary. You know, I mean, there's genetic aspects to these sorts of things, but yeah, I wasn't just going to give in to that. It didn't make all that much sense with me with regards to how I was otherwise. So, and the doctor did a whole bunch of blood tests, all came back completely normal. And so this went on. I had a few visits to the doctor saying, no, there's something else going on here. I'm not just going to accept that it's hereditary. I'm actually nothing like the rest of the family who had type 1 diabetes. My grandma, sister and brother, celiacs. My mum, rheumatoid arthritis and high blood pressure. So a lot of that didn't apply to me, so I wasn't just going to take that. But there was nothing else to go on, you know, at that time, except for then I started getting very fatigued running on the hills. So I would get nearer the top of a hill, and I'd just get completely breathless and couldn't push through, which was very strange for me. I'd always been able to push through, even if I was on my hands and knees crawling. There was no way I'd ever stop. But this was like a black wave that would come over me and mean that I had to stop and, you know, put my hands on my knees, bend over, breathe, catch my breath, and then start it off again, and only for a short period of time, then it would happen again. And then, so that started on the very tops of the big hills, and then it got lower down the hill and lower down the hill, and then it got to the point where on the flat, I couldn't even run a few 20 meters without having to stop. And I had an iWatch, an Apple Watch at that stage, and it was on the tops of hills. It was only going up to about 70 beats per minute when I was really trying hard to run. And we thought the watch was probably faulty. And so one day, very lucky I didn't die on this day, but one day I got my partner Mike to go to the top of the big hill, and I said, right, I'm just going to keep pushing as much as I can to get to the hill and keep running. And when I get there, you know, take my pulse so we get an accurate measurement. So I ran, and I just couldn't run. I had to keep stopping, trying to catch my breath. The black wave, as if I was going to black out, but I never actually did. And I finally got to the top of the hill. I was just about throwing up, could hardly breathe, read my pulse, and I think it was 68.
I'm sorry, what number? 68?
68.
68, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so not in comparison, nowadays when I'm running, or in comparison back then, which would be more accurate, if I got pushed through at the top of a hill and was going for gold, I'd probably max out at 168, my heart rate.
Yep.
Yeah, so it just wasn't going up high enough. So at that stage, I emailed my doctor and gave, you know, because, and this is the benefit of being, even if you're not suffering anything, of being really aware of your health and doing all you can to be healthy and fit. I just can't push that enough, you know, to whatever you can do. Because then when you go to your doctor, you can say, I know this for sure, and then this changed and that changed, and this is not me, and you know, so I emailed her with quite a good rundown of why I still thought there was something else going on, and unfortunately there was an administrative muck up there where she got that email and she replied to it and said, I think you need to come in and see me. Thanks, Sherlock. But she replied to the email that it had come through the admin people at the doctor's surgery. So when she replied, it went back to them and they never forwarded it on to me.
So you never got it?
I never got it. So there was a 3-week gap where I thought, well, she clearly doesn't think it's important. I'll just keep muddling through. And weirdly, stupidly, but not at the time, didn't seem stupid at the time, I actually thought I was just had a head thing going on. I really thought that I'd been spending too much time with friends who were like, oh, I'm getting old and slow, and oh, menopause means that I can't do this and I can't do that. And I thought that I'd got that in my head and that my body was going, Sarah, you're old and slow, you know, this is quite normal. And, you know, it's so stupid looking back. I really thought it was a head thing, that I was just allowing myself to be lazy, and that's why all of these things were happening. So when I didn't hear back from her, it just made sense to me at the time that I just had to sort myself out and
you rationalized it.
Yeah, and I just had to push harder. So that's probably the time that I could have mostly died, because you know, I was just still trying to push through this thing that was my poor heart. I kind of apologize to it now because it was going through so much and still managed to keep going. So that will make sense probably as we go through the diagnosis. But then finally I thought, no, I'll just need to go back and see her. So I made an appointment. And funnily enough, on the same day I made an appointment, she messaged me and said, Sarah, you still haven't gotten back to me. I need to see you. So so I had another appointment. Again, I had to kind of go, nah, this isn't right. She said, do you think we should put you on the ECG? So that's the heart thing. And I said, I think that'd be a great idea. So I jumped on that, and she looked at the result and said, well, I didn't expect that, and sent me to the hospital, and that's where I stayed. Yeah, for over a month.
The next day?
The same day. She wouldn't let me, yeah.
Wow.
She said, you're going to the hospital, and even if they're busy, you're not to leave. And that was the best advice ever. Yeah.
And so she didn't know what it was. She just knew there was something wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something very wrong.
And you were there for a month at the hospital?
Yeah, I was in our local city, Rotorua, hospital for about 4 days. And they were absolutely fabulous there. The initial general physician that I saw at the emergency department, Dr. Andrew Bowers, he was incredible. Stayed there in the cardiac unit being monitored, and then I was shipped through to Waikato Hospital, which is in Hamilton, about an hour and a half away, which they are the local hospital. Well, not local, they're out of our district, but they're the hospital that is more specialised in heart stuff. And I was there for nearly a month.
So how long before someone started using the word sarcoidosis?
Yeah, it was not initially. So at Waikato, they, in the cardiac area, they lump you in rooms with 5 other people, of male and female. They're a bit crowded and busy and all that stuff. And at that time, I was put in cardiac unit, a regional cardiac unit, which was kind of people from out of district, all lumped in. They didn't really have a clue what was going on, but they knew that my heart was it was lower. The beat was lowering, you know, to as low as 20 beats per minute. And I could miraculously still get up and function. And at that many beats, my heart was so strong, because it had to figure out a way to get the connectivity, you know, from one end or top to bottom. And despite the fact that I was riddled with sarcoidosis granulomas in it. So it had figured it out the long way around, but it was getting tight. So probably I was in hospital, gosh, actually, I've got a little list here of things. I went into hospital on the 6th of May, into Waikato, and a few days later, I was in theatre ready to have a to have a pacemaker installed. And I was on the table, wired up, drugged up, and my cardiologist at the time, I remember her coming to me and saying, "Sarah, I'm not going to do this today. I think there's something else going on. I think you've got sarcoidosis or lymphoma." And so I have to thank her for saving my life, I believe. That's Janice Swampili, and I don't think I'm pronouncing her surname properly, but yep, we're all ready to roll, pop it in, and I was painted up and everything. I think the guy was there with the scalpel and all sorts, but she said, no, there's something else going on. And so went back to the ward and then waited on a cardiac MRI, which took about a week. In the public health system, these things do kind of take a wee bit of time. And while I was still alive and being monitored, I wasn't top priority really. But the cardiac MRI did indicate that there was sarcoidosis or something else. And then COVID came into the equation. In that we were in the room with 5 other patients. It was going to happen, in a hospital. Somebody had COVID, so we were all considered close contacts, so weren't really allowed to do anything else until cleared from that. So that was actually probably quite a nerve-wracking time, in that my heart was really, really slowing down considerably then and stopping. So it could stop up to 7 seconds at a time at this stage. And and again, me underestimating the whole situation. I think I must be a bit of a dungy in the head, actually, because one day my monitor, it had 0, so there was no heartbeat, and I looked at it and I tapped it and I thought, that's not right. And so it completely stopped by like 7 seconds. And then there was only one other guy in the room with me at that stage, because everybody else had been cleared and had kind of gone. There was still just 2 of us still waiting to be cleared for the COVID. And I said, "Oh, that's not flash. It actually went to 0. And he goes, "Oh." And and then it was about 20 minutes later, and he said, "The nurses are taking a long time to come. You did press the button, didn't you?"
Uh-huh.
I said, "No." Well, it started up again, so I think it's all right. And he said, "You're kidding me." So I pressed the button and they came in, and that's when things got a bit more urgent. I got shipped down to the cardiac number 1 ward, where I was popped on some medication to keep my heart going, and still COVID, so I was isolated and still had to wait every day for clearance until I could get my PET CT scan to really know what was going on. So finally got cleared, got through for the PET CT, and it showed, yes, active granulomas in my heart, in my esophagus, on a jugular, weirdly, just up here, and on the lymph nodes of my lungs. And
That's so interesting, because that would be consistent. It would look like lymphoma, right? So the doctor said you either have lymphoma or cardiac sarcoidosis, and really you had outwardly what could have appeared as both. I'm just so curious what made her see that at the 11th hour right before surgery.
Well, it's a funny thing, because I've just been so grateful for her, and I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to see her before I left the hospital and thank her for all that she did for me. And so but then since then, I've gone to a private cardiologist as well, who specialises in the cardiac sarcoidosis. And I mentioned to him how grateful I was for Dr. Janice, and he said, well, of course, you were 54 years old and had never had any health conditions before. You know, it just was, well, of course, there had to be something else going on. But why she's particularly thought of the sarcoidosis or the lymphoma, I'm not 100% sure. And then they really weren't sure about the sarcoidosis, even after the PET CT, even after putting in the ICD, defibrillator, pacemaker. They still weren't 100% sure. It was just really, really fortunate that I had the granulomas on my lung lymph nodes, which meant they could biopsy. If I'd only had it in the heart, they would have probably been a bit wary about biopsying the heart. So fortunately, I had it on the lymph nodes of the lungs, so they could biopsy, and that came through conclusive as sarcoidosis. But if they hadn't been able to do that, they would have considered both.
Yeah, I just interviewed a cardiologist for the previous episode to this one at Duke University, and he talked about doing biopsies of the heart, but he said sometimes you do a biopsy and you get healthy tissue. And then you don't have a good findings just because you don't always know where in the heart to look for the granuloma.
Really?
So, he says you do a biopsy, you think, well, maybe it's sarcoidosis, and then it comes back negative, and it's like a swing and a miss because you didn't look in the right place. So,
wow.
You kind of were fortunate in that you had it elsewhere so they could biopsy a lymph node where they could know exactly where they were getting the tissue from.
Yes.
And they would therefore get more likely to get a sample that would show a finding. So that's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. And that surprises me that they would go into the heart non-specific, because from looking at my PET CT scan, it's quite specific where in the heart, the active granulomas were. So my heart, just what an amazing tool,
Right.
It had just been completely blocked by these granulomas. So it had figured out some other way of getting the connectivity through for as long as it had.
Yeah.
And then just gave up the ghost. But man, I'm just so grateful for it. Just and it was with echocardiogram showed it was an extremely, other than that, healthy heart, just through all the hard work it was having to put in to get the right amount of blood through for my lifestyle.
So did you have, the way I kind of, at my layperson's level, understand it is you can have sarcoidosis that blocks electrical signals within the heart, or you can actually have granulomas that are physically stopping the heart muscle from pulsing or pumping or being able to eject blood or intake blood the way that it's supposed to. Do you know which one you had?
Oh, I've got all my paperwork here. I could read through some stuff, but I just based on my layman's understanding as well, I'm thinking it was mostly the connectivity, but that got so bad it stopped the pumping altogether. I'm thinking.
I think that's the more typical one. Yeah.
So the way I picture it is, that it's kind of deformed because of the granulomas that have formed in there, and at some stage it's gotten so bad, the connectivity couldn't even find its way.
So you and I are speaking in March of 2025, and you were diagnosed. So when would this diagnosis have happened? In 2020, 2021?
Last year, 2024.
24. So it took that long.
I was diagnosed in May last year, and it would have been October the year before, 2023, that I started feeling the fatigue. Although I went through are you familiar with Strava?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes.
And so I kind of went through just having a look at where things might have. I did this the other night, and it was actually quite overwhelming. But I went through a few. I had been surfing, horse riding, trail running, pack walking, all that sort of thing. And then on the 2nd of April, 2024, I did a farm run, and it was only short. It was only 3.21 kilometers, and my minutes per kilometer were 8.36, which is minutes slower than normal. And I put in the comments weirdly tough. And so yeah, that I'm picking that's pretty much, yeah. Excuse me. So, and on December 2023, it would have been, I did 10 kilometers and commented so much harder than it should have been. And yet in November 2023, I did 10.5 kilometers, and it was my personal record in the 10K. So, and I don't know if people generally, there's been some thoughts as to what the heck has inspired my inflammatory response to go a bit cray-cray. Who knows, eh? I mean, I've been exposed to herbicides and pesticides on the farm. I lived in South America for a period of time. I've been exposed to gunpowder and tear gas, and but I've also been exposed to transferred trauma from the victims that I'm dealing with, and I had gotten for a while to the point of flight, that fight or flight thing, doing that, and had to take a wee break. Who knows what it could be, and then possibly the time of life, where your hormones go a bit haywire, and I've heard it referred to as sniper's mile or sniper's alley, where anything can hit you at this time of life, So who knows? I don't use up too much energy trying to think about the whys and the hows and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But reading up on things to be able to talk to you today and be a bit more, informative, I can pretty much see where it started to really affect me.
Yeah. So Strava, for those of you who are listening who are not fitness fanatics, is an app that we all use. So I use it to track my bicycle miles and my hiking, and I mean, I'll get goofy. I'll even turn it on when I mow the lawn. So,
Yes.
that's a 2-mile walk. I'm going to record that. I'm putting it out there, baby. And I want to see what my heart rate was,
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was walking in New York City recently, turn on the Strava, it's like that's 18
you've got
blocks,
issues.
Got to do it. Got to do it. And then all your friends like it when they see what you're doing. But
yes, it's so uplifting.
it's social media for fitness buffs. So anyway, so now in New Zealand, I would assume you guys are using the same sort of menu of drugs that we are here in the States. So prednisone, methotrexate. Did you take any of those drugs?
Yeah. So actually, before we moved too far away from the fitness, when I was in hospital, there was one hill on the farm that I just visualized. It just came to me, a bunch of times a day, just actually running. That was the hill that I could have died on when my poor partner was sitting at the top, waiting for me to get there and test my pulse. And poor thing, he just knew there was no way that I was not going to do the stuff. So he just kind of had to run with it, So that hill, when I was in hospital, I kept visualizing running all the way to the top. And of course, I'm going to get all blubbery again. But on the 3rd of June, after I had been discharged from hospital, end of May, 3rd of June, I conquered the hill. Yeah, I walked to the top of it with my dog, and my sister and my daughter were walking with me, but they stayed down the bottom, let me go and have my moments and with my dog, and walked to the top of that hill. And oh my giddy aunt, that was just the most emotional experience. I just actually howled from the bottom of my stomach. It just came out. I just howled. It was just very, very big moment getting back up out of hospital, back on that hill.
Oh,
just
God.
that's where it is, really. That's where it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But medications, yeah, crikey. The 30 milligrams of prednisone per day. So for me, that was when I was discharged from hospital. When I was discharged from hospital, I went in at about 62, 63 kgs in weight. I was discharged and I was weighing about 58. And then started the 30 milligrams of prednisone. And I know everybody seems to gain weight with that. It fell off me. I got down to 51 kg. Yeah, they think it has to do with the muscle wastage from steroids, and that's possibly mostly what I was made up of. So lost a lot of weight. Yeah, and then my cardiologist. So I had Dr. Janice Swampili initially, and then when the sarcoidosis was diagnosed, I have and still to this day have Dr. Martin Stiles, who is also just cannot speak highly enough of him. He's just absolutely amazing. So grateful to him. And he was consulting with pretty much, I think, the only cardiologist in New Zealand who specialises in the sarcoidosis area, I believe, Dr. Tony Scott. And so they took my case to the National Sarcoidosis Conference, monthly conference. And at that stage, they put me on the methotrexate as well. So 10 milligrams of methotrexate to start with, and I'm up to 20 now. So I've tapered down. I had another PET CT in August. So first PET CT in May, on the medication through to August, another PET CT showed still active granulomas then, but in reduced avidity. So I've reduced my prednisone since August to now down to 7 milligrams per day, and increased the methotrexate up to 20 per week.
Okay. And those are the only drugs you're on currently?
No, I'm still on quinapril for the blood pressure, which is still up, but it's coming down now quite significantly. Yep, so I'm reducing that. Vitamin D, folic acid each week, vitamin D once a month, and now rhizidronate, which is for calcium. So I think they are the only ones. Let me just double check. Yeah, and the omeprazole to go with the steroid, with the prednisone, to help not get ulcers. Yeah, but I'm trying to cut that out too. I'm not a big fan of taking medications, but I do know in this case, really, I have no choice with regards to methotrexate and prednisone. Yeah.
Yep.
I've been really lucky with methotrexate, have had minimal side effects, not much nauseousness, a bit of fatigue. A lot of my hair fell out, but it's suddenly sprouting back again, which is awesome because that was a thing.
Your hair fell out.
Yeah, heaps of it. And then I think, it's slowing down. Then I'd wash my hair and dry it and look at the towel, and there'd be a big mess there. Yeah, came out.
So that was from the methotrexate.
I'm picking that's the only thing it could be. I've seen it. I've Googled. We've all Googled, eh? We all spend
Dr.
so
Google,
much time on Google. Yeah. I think they say just 1 or 3% get affected by that. So it was just either stress or hormones or the methotrexate, but that's slowed down. But I get very, very dry fingertips and cracked heels, and I think that's the methotrexate or maybe the prednisone. But fatigue probably is the biggest thing, really, and I don't know if that's medication or the sarcoidosis, But I've learned that exercise fights fatigue, and it doesn't make any sense. And a lot of people will think I'm just so tired, I need to rest. And I just say individual cases, but no, do something, move, just keep moving. Every day you're alive, just be so grateful for that, and move and embrace that, and it's not easy, sometimes you just want to sleep all day, but if you get out and move, wow, then you're like, wow, actually, go figure.
Makes a difference. Although those cat naps helped me out a little bit when, days when I didn't have a choice, where I had to go do something.
I'm so relieved to hear.
Little 20-minute nap,
Yes.
no more than that, and it really helped. Really helped.
Thank you for saying that, because yes, I'm really lucky. My workplace has just been incredible. And I say I'm sorry, but sometimes I just have to go and nap, and I cannot function beyond that point unless I do that. So there's a medical room here at work that I can duck away to. And
you're so lucky. And because bosses in particular, want to think you're just lazy, you're not motivated, don't want to work. I was like, what are you doing sleeping on the job? Look, you just don't understand, right? You just don't understand,
Yes, I've not had that at all. They just they're just so grateful that that I'm here, and that maybe comes from me, because I've kind of shifted that. I'm like, no, you guys are just lucky I'm here. So
that's right.
So if I have to take a quarter of an hour to just recharge, then that's what I'm going to do. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm taking the whole day off. So what would you prefer?
Yeah, exactly.
I've not had to actually come up with any of that bravado talk at all, because they've just been amazing. Yeah. And it's the weirdest thing, and bring me back if I digress, but that's the weirdest thing about this whole journey is, I actually couldn't say that it's been bad or good. It's just been very weird, but there have been so many positives come out of it, like the support from friends and family and work, and just the focusing and the gratitude for all that good stuff has made this journey weirdly not bad or good, just confusing. But the good stuff that's come out of it has just been, I don't know, just what life's all about, really.
Yeah, that's true. I've found the same thing. I think if you asked me if I could do it over again without sarcoidosis, I'd still select that. But
Yes.
but be that as it may, it hasn't. There's been so many good things that have come out as a result of it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Did you go through therapy at all through any of this?
What's that like?
Like sitting down
therapy?
and talking with with a therapist, a shrink, as it were, psychologist.
Yes and no. I have a clinical psychologist because of the work I do. We have a compulsory setup here where I have to go and have a well check every 3 months with regards to kind of help get through the stuff that I do for work. And I'm really fortunate. My psychologist is just absolute the bomb, and so I've maintained that contact with him through all this. But actually, I don't think I've really had to talk a heck of a lot about the sarcoidosis, and I've always been someone that's I've kind of been able to step up when the going gets tough. So the diagnosis, I found that it was something that I was like, right, let's sort this out. Let's do everything I can to make this the best situation that it can possibly be. So we're all crazy about anti-inflammatory lifestyle and all that jazz. And inspirational quotes. I've got a little booklet with inspirational quotes that I've doctored up and carry around with me all the time. And I haven't done the therapy thing, but I'm very fortunate that I've got an amazing partner, an amazing family. My kids, my adult kids, are just can bounce anything off any one of them. And friends that just have gone above and beyond, and a fantastic psychologist. So I haven't taken to therapy specifically for the sarcoidosis, but I've connected with people who are going through things and have had to deal with the medications, and that's another thing. I like, I'm talking like it's all been easy peasy lemon squeezy, but it's not been. I've had some terrible low moments and just like feel like I've fallen into a black hole and I just can't find my way out of it, and fortunately I've managed to limit those moments to a day, maybe 2 or 3 days maximum, before I've been able to get out of that hole again. And so it wasn't the diagnosis. I don't think it was so much the medications and the effect on them. It was my response to my reaction to the medications that was the hardest thing to deal with. And my beating myself up. I didn't accept that the medications could do that to me. I didn't want that to be a cop out for my own bad behavior that I couldn't sort out. So I again, another dare brain moment where everybody's saying prednisone will muck you up, prednisone will give you mood swings, and the going on is one thing, and then the tapering off is another thing, that's just as bad, if not worse. And me, I'm like, no, I'm not like anyone else. I'm just behaving badly, I've got to sort it out, which is where this connection is so fantastic. It's like, no, it is a real thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to accept it, because then you just allow it to happen, but don't beat yourself up too much for it. Yeah.
I was the same way. I always felt like I can run farther, I can deal with more pain, I can do these things that other people can't do, and if you give me prednisone, I'm not going to be affected.
Yes.
And at some point you just got to sit back and say, if they were going to, this is the analogy I use. If I was going to have surgery tomorrow for something unrelated and they gave me anesthesia, I'm going to go to sleep just like the next guy.
Yes.
It's not like I'm so great that, if they give me anesthesia, I'm not going to go to sleep. They're knocking me out. And it's, so at some level, we're all human and we're all going to react to these drugs. And it's unfortunate, but you just got to admit, and you can't be angry with yourself. You just got to, you just got to give yourself a break.
Yeah. And that's in my little book of inspirational quotes is, speak to yourself, speak to yourself like you would speak to others. And then in brackets, I've got, that means, and then there's a few swear words, like, don't be a dick to yourself, just be nice to yourself. But I definitely still promote not just accepting it and laying down and curling up and dying. I do promote a little bit of resistance to this stuff, because the alternative is going, well, this is sarcoidosis. I've got it. This is my life. I may as well curl up and die. And so, no, please don't do that. Just do fight it a little bit, I'm thinking, but accept that these other things are very real as well. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, that's a great point to end on, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Oh, gee, no, I guess I could chatterbox all day, but just what a weird journey, and so individual, and I just promote that positivity. So hard if you're going through a tough ass time, but somewhere in there, turn something around to good. The hair falling out, that rocked my boat a little bit, but hey, I still had a head and hair, and I was still able and up and looking in the mirror. So that's a positive. Just the people around you, they're going through as much as you are, sometimes more. Be aware of that. I'm aware of that, because I'm just continue through oblivious and driven to make it as good as it can be, and other people are they're going through just as much, so yeah, I'm mindful of that. Just grab it and do the best you can with it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
So thanks to Sarah for her service in the law enforcement community, and for joining me, and for being the latest Sarc patient to just come forward and share the story of how the disease is impacting her life. And again, I guess the world has just gotten smaller and smaller because of the internet, and we don't think anything about it. But the fact that I'm sitting in Roanoke, Virginia, and interviewing somebody in New Zealand, and somebody, in fact, who listens to the podcast, just continues to blow my mind. So thank you to Sarah for reaching out and for agreeing to share her story, and let's hope that her life continues to go well. Don't forget, April Sarcoidosis Awareness Month. There's a lot happening this month, events and opportunities often generated by the staff at FSR. They work on those ideas in collaboration with patients and medical centers, and they do it all year long, and then they surface here in the month of April. So go back and listen to our previous episode or check out the FSR website. And this is a good time to contact me if you'd like to share your story on the podcast. Best way is email carlinagency@gmail.com. The official Sarc Fighter song is Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band, the White Hot Lizards. Mark is a fellow Sarc Fighter. We got an episode from Mark. We got an update from Mark in episode 118. I release the Sarc Fighter podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, my trusty dogs Dougal and Shandy are curled up on the chairs in my office. They make my life so much better. The backstory to the founding for the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Follow Sarc Fighter on Facebook, Instagram, and Peloton. My cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. And yes, I've been back out it again. The weather's breaking here in the spring, and I am slowly, it seems like very slowly this year, getting back up to speed on my bicycle. If you're new here and you're trying to figure out what sarcoidosis is, try listening to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart. My story is episode 1. And again, if you'd like to contact me, send me an email, carlinagency@gmail.com. There's a link in the show notes or the podcast description, as it were. Till next time, keep fighting.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting